Willkommen, meine Damen und Herren, in Großbritannien, dem Land, das unglücklicherweise die Pandemie-Europameisterschaft mit gehörigem Abstand vor Italien, Frankreich und Spanien mittlerweile gewonnen hat. Ein Platz, den den Briten niemand mehr streitig machen kann. Sollte Sie der Markt interessieren, sollte Sie das Land interessieren, sollten Sie geschäftlicher machen, halten Sie Nachschau auf unserer Webseite wko.at/Außenwirtschaft/Großbritannien-GB. Wir versuchen aktuell dort zu informieren oder setzen Sie sich mit uns in Verbindung. Mein Name ist Christian Käsberg, ich leite das Büro der Wirtschaftskammer hier seit Anfang 2016. Ich bin doppelt traumatisiert von Covid-19. Erstens als 60-jähriger Hedonist bin ich Ehrenmitglied der Hochrisikogruppe. Zweitens beraubt mich das Virus meiner Lebensgrundlage oder hat mich meiner Lebensgrundlage beraubt, die nämlich darin bestand, die Ursachen und Folgen des Austritts der Briten aus der Europäischen Union zu zerkauen und wieder zu kauen, 3 Jahre lang. Ein Thema, das niemand mehr interessiert. Sollten Sie noch so eine Restportion an Interesse daran haben, der Brexit kommt, der endgültige Brexit kommt mit hoher Wahrscheinlichkeit Ende 2020. Er wird ein schlechter Brexit sein, ein schlecht verhandelter Brexit, ein teurer Brexit, ein Brexit vermutlich ohne jedes oder wenn, dann nur mit einem schwachen und dünnen Freihandelsabkommen. Aber die britische Regierung hat zu Recht erkannt, dass die immens hohen Kosten, volkswirtschaftlichen Kosten des schlecht verhandelten und teuren Brexits in den vieles höheren volkswirtschaftlichen Kosten der Pandemie unbemerkt verschwinden werden und deswegen politisch auch nicht mehr gefährlich und von Bedeutung sind. Willkommen bei einem Webinar zum Thema Branding in der Krise. Heute geht es in a nutshell um eine spannende Fragestellung, nämlich die Unternehmen zunehmend gefragt werden und die sie zunehmend beantworten müssen. How does the success of my company make the world a better place? Selten hat die Frage mehr Relevanz gehabt als heute, ja, aber schon in der Vergangenheit wurden ihre Antworten in Markenversprechen destilliert und diese Markenversprechen stehen natürlich, was ihre Glaubwürdigkeit und Authentizität anbelangt, in Krisenzeiten ganz besonders auf dem Prüfstand, weil Konsumenten nämlich sich Rettung nicht nur von der Politik und von den Gesundheitsbehörden erhoffen, sondern auch von den Unternehmen, denen sie eine wesentliche Rolle im Finden eines Auswegs aus dieser Krisensituation zuschreiben. Sie sind bereit zu belohnen, aber sie sind auch bereit zu bestrafen, wer ihre Erwartungen enttäuscht. Das Außenwirtschaftscenter London nützt die Dichte und Tiefe der akademischen, unternehmerischen Auseinandersetzung mit Zukunftsthemen in dieser Weltmetropole London, in diesem Finanzzentrum London, in diesem Firmensitz der Fortune 1000 London und in diesem Spielplatz der großen Consultants und der großen Thinktanks dieser Welt seit Jahren, um österreichische Unternehmen an globales Innovationswissen anzubinden. Und diese Anbindung, deswegen steht sozusagen Branding auch keineswegs allein, sondern in einem Reigen von Veranstaltungsangeboten. Bei vielen Veranstaltungen in der Vergangenheit haben wir Sonntagsreden gehalten zum Thema erhöhte Schlagzahl der Veränderung und technologische Umwälzung und die Zukunft kommt schneller, als man denkt. Und dann hat die Pandemie tatsächlich unsere Prophezeiungen überholt und wir stehen heute vor einer Zukunft, die wir uns vor 4 Monaten weder vorstellen wollten noch vorstellen konnten, die wir bewältigen können, allerdings nur dann, wenn es uns gelingt, unsere Werkzeugkästen in der Unternehmensführung und im Technologieeinsatz umzudenken. Deswegen ein Reigen, ein Bouquet, ein Strauß von Themen, die wir für Sie zusammengestellt haben. Wir haben in den vergangenen Wochen zum Thema Corporate Learning im Homeoffice und zu Flexible Working and Beyond 2 Webinare abgehalten. Die stehen zur Nachschau und zum Nachhören auf unserem YouTube-Kanal zur Verfügung. Und wir kommen am 26. Mai noch mit einem Thema auf Sie zu, das heißt Innovation in der Krise. Da geht es in Kooperation mit unseren Freunden und Kooperationspartnern vom Imperial College um Design Thinking, also um einen holistischeren, ungewöhnlicheren Zugang zur unternehmerischen Problemlösung, zum Nachdenken in Teams, um Neues zu schaffen, aber unter Umständen häufiger noch, um aus Altem Neues, Wertvolles zu gewinnen und an die Oberfläche zu befördern. Im Juni dann 3 Technologieseminare, die wir gemeinsam mit unseren Kollegen in New York und in München abwickeln. Da geht es um Themen 1, die Krise als Treiber von Immersive Technologies, 2, die Krise als Treiber der Digitalisierung der Lieferketten, 3, die Krise als Treiber additiver Fertigung. Ich hoffe, dass wir Sie bei allen oder zumindest einer dieser Veranstaltungen wieder begrüßen dürfen. I would like to thank you at this time for your visit here in London and hand over to my friend and colleague Michael Gray, who will introduce our exquisite panel of speakers and lead through the program. Please stay healthy, make sure that others do too, keep calm, keep your spirits up, and I hope to see you soon again face to face and hopefully without a mask, either here or back home in Austria. Michael, they're all yours now.
Thank you, Christian, and welcome from me too to my home office. There have never been this many people in my home office, so please try and make yourself comfortable for the next hour. We have 3 really excellent speakers coming up, and I'll tell you who those are now. We're going to start by talking to David Grayson, who is Professor Emeritus of Corporate Responsibility at the Cranfield Business School, the Cranfield School of Management. We're then going to talk to Manfred Abraham, who is the CEO of an agency called BrandCap. It's a brand strategy agency with offices in London, New York, and most recently Hong Kong. And then we're going to go over to Munich and talk to Thomann Geiswinkler, who is the guy you talk to at LinkedIn if you want to find out how to do employer branding, talent acquisition effectively on LinkedIn. Before we start, I just have a few introductory remarks to make. Most important thing to say is that we are really enthusiastic to have your questions. Just write them in the chat box and we will answer them at the end. Don't worry about writing notes as you go along. You're going to get the slides. We'll send you an email with those, and we'll also send you an email where you can watch not just this webinar, but also all the other ones, as Christian just mentioned, on our YouTube channel. So before we move over to David, I thought it would be interesting just to show you a few examples that we've seen in the UK recently of how brands have reacted to the crisis and how that's gone for them. The background to that are the kind of questions that are brought up in this survey, which you can see on the screen now. It's the Edelman Trust Barometer. They did a spring update a couple of weeks ago, and I think there are 3 things that came out of that. The first is that we are more worried about solving the health crisis than we are about the economy. So the health crisis comes first. 67% of people saying that saving lives was more important than saving jobs. So I've obviously managed to write that the wrong way around on the slide, but it's saving lives more than jobs. People wanting a cautious return to work. Then this idea of building back better, the idea that trust is really important to brands and doing the right thing. 62% say that brands have a critical role in addressing the challenges of the pandemic, and this is really interesting. A third of the people have already stopped using brands where they are not comfortable or not happy with the way that those brands have reacted to the crisis. So you can really see the direct consequences here. How are we doing so far? Well, 55% say brands, according to Edelman, are responding better than governments have responded. However, you can see that there's still quite a lot to do. 43% say they're not protecting their employees. 46% say they're not helping out the smaller companies in their supply chains. And 29% say that CEOs are doing an outstanding job. So that's the vast majority saying that CEOs are not doing an outstanding job. And if you compare that to scientists and government, you'll see that those 2 groups are rather more far ahead. Moving on to the next slide. I say very quickly, and I'm going to rush over these because I know that Manfred's going to come back to some of them, but just a couple of examples. In the UK, we've seen the government asked companies to help respond to the crisis by switching their production to the manufacture of ventilators. There was something called the Ventilator Challenge, which companies like Airbus and McLaren and Rolls-Royce have taken part in. And equally, companies have been called upon to help produce personal protective equipment, PPE. Burberry is a great example of a company that's been doing that. An interesting thing in the UK is that with the financial support that the government has announced, a lot of those measures have been, a lot of the money has been distributed by the banking system, by businesses' banks, so not by a government organisation, but people have had to go to their banks to get loans. And that was quite problematic at first, because in the UK system, the government is not 100% backing the loans that the banks are giving to companies. So the guarantee that the government offer doesn't cover the whole loan, which means that the banks have to take some of the risks themselves. And that led to them being initially quite slow, a lot of people were complaining, in giving out their loans. So banks suddenly found themselves really at the forefront of this crisis, and had to start coming out with messaging to show that they were listening, they were doing their best to get these loan applications as quickly as possible, while at the same time having to do their due diligence, because they're banks, they don't give money out for nothing. Moving on to the next example. Supermarkets. Manfred's going to talk about supermarkets later. Another example of a business that's right at the forefront of the crisis. In the UK, we've been talking a lot about key workers, which we used to just think of doctors and nurses, but now we talk about supermarket workers as key workers. And supermarkets brands have really done pretty well in this crisis. People have a good impression of them. However, the Tesco example here is quite an interesting one, because just as the crisis was was beginning and the supermarkets were being so important, Tesco paid out a dividend to its shareholders, quite a large dividend, and that was a very difficult thing for them to manage in terms of reputation, because at the same time as they were making use of the government support measures, they were also paying out dividends. Yeah, we've also seen a lot of advertising, which seems strange to me. You almost double take and think, is this really what companies are saying? Asking us not to use their products. So on the left of the slide there, you see Uber example. There's been a TV campaign running here, which actually is an American ad that they've been showing, asking people not to ride with Uber. Thank you for not riding with Uber. Equally, we've seen the railway companies telling us not to use their services. And the bottom example there is a betting shop telling people to give the NHS, give the health service better odds by not coming to their betting shops. So quite a strange example. Moving on. This is an example which I think is becoming more and more important now as we begin to talk about relaxing some of the lockdown measures, a discussion that's only really just starting in the UK. This example comes right from the beginning. Again, just mention it very briefly because I know Manfred's got it in his slides. But Sports Direct is a sports retailer. Right at the beginning of the crisis, when the lockdown was starting, a lot of shops were being told that they had to shut, pretty much all the shops. The boss of Sports Direct tried to argue that his company was one of the shops that should be kept open. He said that it counted as an essential service to be able to sell sports equipment because exercise is so important. As you might be able to imagine, that didn't go down very well with his employees and with the public generally. 95% of people, according to the poll there, said that sports equipment certainly wasn't essential. And as a result, Sports Direct had to come out and issue a big apology, say that they completely misjudged it, and their brand certainly suffered as a result of that. And that's absolutely crucial now, because we're seeing a big focus on the discussion of how brands and how companies can convince their employees that it's safe to go back to work, and how they can convince their customers, in the case of retail, that it's safe to go back into the shops. So let's come quickly on to our first speaker. That's David Grayson, CBE. David is Emeritus Professor of Corporate Responsibility at the Cranfield School of Management, and I can see he's joined us there. David's got a 30-year career in this area of sustainable leadership and responsible business. He's the author of numerous books. Most relevant, I think, for us is going to be the book called All In. You can see the cover there, available at all good bookshops and some not so good bookshops as well, I suspect. There you see a few of the names and people that he's worked with, not just organizations and institutions, but also companies. I know you started your career in marketing at Procter & Gamble. The CBE behind David's name, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, stands for Commander of the British Empire, which he was given for his services to disability in 1999. That was an upgrade from the Officer of the British Empire, which he got for his services to British business. But I think the achievement that he's really proud of is probably that he has been named one of the top 10 tweeters on the issue of sustainable leadership in the world, which puts him up there with Al Gore and Sheryl Sandberg and Tim Cook of Apple. So we're in very good company, and thank you, David, for joining us today. We just heard a little bit there hinting at this idea of purpose, a word that we hear more and more. For those that aren't so familiar with that, just give us a little intro to what we should understand by that. David, can I ask you to turn your microphone on?
Organizations have a purpose. My understanding of what we mean by having a really good purpose is one which is authentic, so it does relate back to how the business actually behaves. It's also inspirational, so it motivates employees and others who do business with the business to want to do so. And above all, it has to be practical. It has to be the basis for taking the right decisions. And I don't think you can look at purpose in isolation from the culture of the organization, the way we do business around here. And I think the two are increasingly interlinked. And some of the examples that you saw just a few moments ago really relate back to what's the instinctive default reaction of the leadership of an organization or the different unit heads and so on when confronted with a difficult decision. And if you have a strong purpose, if you have a strong culture which reinforces that purpose, it doesn't guarantee you'll always make the right decision, but I think it gives you a much better chance of doing so. And you're right, I think that's only going to become more important as we start to come through this dreadful pandemic and really build back better.
Yeah. What sort of struck you most about how the current crisis has sort of amplified this debate? What are the things that have most come out to you?
So I think, as you said a few moments ago, Michael, a really important issue is about, do we trust the messages that we are getting from businesses? You referenced some of the major supermarket chains. I've been getting very regular communications as a customer of a number of those different supermarkets, explaining what they were doing, explaining some of the challenges in terms of keeping shelf stocked and so on. And it's that kind of practical communication with your customers, with your employees, with so on, which I think has really been amplified through this crisis. And I believe that one of the enduring lessons from the crisis is going to be the importance of a radical transparency by businesses, whether they're large publicly quoted companies or much smaller privately owned businesses and so on.
Right. I mean, we really see in the current situation how those good intentions are not just good intentions, but they translate into actions, the things that we can see the companies doing. And I think that's probably a really important aspect of this.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, there's a beautiful saying from the late American poet and writer Maya Angelou that people don't remember what you said to them. They don't remember necessarily what you did to them, but they remember how you made them feel. And I think how businesses make employees and customers and suppliers and so on feel at this critical time will be something that will linger for a very long time indeed.
Yeah.
For good and for ill.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you really do see this as a big moment. You don't think that once we eventually get back to normal, it will be back to business as it used to be. You think that this is lasting change?
So I have lost count already since the middle of March of just how many Zoom meetings and team sessions and go-to meeting platforms and so on I've been on with businesses and NGOs and academics and journalists and so on around the world debating this very question. And on the one hand, you get some people who say, no, the moment that we can all go back to business as usual, you bet we'll do that in absolute spades. And other people saying nothing will be the same again. And of course, the reality is it will be somewhere between the two. But I think that we have done a huge amount of innovation, whether it's in public health, whether it's in home care, whether it's in remote working and so on. And we've done that innovation at a speed that probably no organization thought that it could possibly successfully manage. And I just simply do not believe that having very painfully, with an incredible hard work on lots of people's part, done so much innovation, that we're simply going to reverse all of that. So by definition, it's not going to be business as usual any time. I think for those who do, they're saying you as our employees have shown that you can make it work. So why on earth would we not give you that flexibility going forward? Why wouldn't we show that we trust you if we do?
What we're going to do, we still have lots of questions to discuss with David. So I think what we'll do, we'll come back to David at the end of our hour and incorporate the rest of the discussion in our questions from the audience, if that's all right with you. So let's move on, and I'm going to ask Manfred to turn on his microphone. The internet has also not been kind to Manfred today, which means that we can't see what he looks like, but here's a picture of him. Manfred is the CEO of BrandCap, as I mentioned before. He was previously head of a consultancy team at Interbrand. He's worked with a whole load of really top-end companies, both from B2C brands like Lane Crawford, Fruit of the Loom, the Radisson Hotel Group, but also companies like Landsec, which is a property developer that owns the neon signs in Piccadilly Circus, which you may know, Grant Thornton, the business professional services company, and also the auction house, Christie's. So I think David's given us the introduction from the angle of responsible business and from corporate social responsibility. Manfred, you're going to show us, I think, how that plays into the branding strategy world.
Yes, well, I hope you can all hear me okay, even though you can't see me. So first, I'm going to start with the apology of the fact that you can't see me. But I just want to say it's not a big miss because my hair is terrible, as we haven't been able to get a haircut. So nothing that you're missing out on. Second, I just want to say thanks for a great introduction from Christian. He always makes me smile talking about Brexit, especially in the current situation. And a fantastic introduction from Michael and David, which leads really nicely in what I want to talk about to you. The particular subject was more around how to communicate during and after a crisis. Now, I guess looking at the background and what we find ourselves in at this moment in time, the financial pressure on businesses is, I don't want to use the word unprecedented, but it has to be used in this circumstance. And it's probably very difficult for most of us to see a clear path forward. But as David said, purpose and strategy in this is quite important. So I want to start a little bit with a personal view on here. I've spent, like you probably will have, more time at home as in waking hours in my flat in the last 2.5 months than I probably have in the last 5 years living here, constantly being on planes or in the office. And what you realize when you got some time living in a space, you get the chance to look around and see if the space is set up for living in it well. So you start moving around things. And I had this idea, and I'm sure you have similar thoughts, that should we look around our businesses in the same way? Because for once, we are not running on 600 different initiatives. Once we've made the changes that we've had to make around furloughing people and looking at cost cutting and any of the other things that were necessary, it gives us a unique opportunity to basically take a bit more time and look at our customers. Have they changed? Have we missed things about them? We can engage with them in a way. They're more open to talk to us, so we should take that opportunity. Secondly, our staff, our people, are they happy? Are they as motivated as they can be? Are our offices places that we can work in the best way possible, or is it not even necessary anymore after having learned that working from home is a possibility much more than we expected? So what I want to talk about is maybe a little bit more about the opportunities that we see here. And one of the things that David touched on was the importance of having the right strategy and purpose as a part of that. If you started communicating during this crisis, you probably found out very quickly if your brand strategy was a good one. Because if it was, you had some good guidance of what to say. And I'm going to show you some examples around that. If it was more like nice writing on the wall, you would have also realized this, because you wouldn't have known, or you wouldn't have had much guidance on what to say. So I'm going to give you some examples on who has been doing this well. And the first example that I'm giving you here, and this is actually a picture from Austria that my dad sent me after the reopening of Austria and the amazing queues at McDonald's. So what was it that possessed people to enter into the longest queues ever seen to go and pick up whatever McDonald's food they wanted to have? There's something interesting there. I also love the difference to the fact that in China, I think the Hermes store, flagship store, had $2.7 million sale on the first day. It's also an interesting observation of who did we really miss the most during this crisis. Mike has already hinted at some of the numbers that are coming out at research into the impact of coronavirus onto customers. 85% of British consumers agree that it's now more important than ever that brands support the local communities. It's almost, and I think David mentioned it too, it's almost brands are stepping into the role of governments. People want them to be supportive and give back. Also, they are very keen to know how they have supported and helped during the crisis. And what better to use than two companies that you might find in very similar positions from a financial perspective, where literally the bottom dropped out of their business pretty much at the same time. Marriott, the world's biggest hotel group, British Airways, not an insignificantly sized airline. What was very interesting was the difference in behavior both of those have displayed. And I'm using a personal anecdote here. I was booked to go on a holiday to Costa Rica. I was going to use both of those companies for this trip. British Airways did everything in their possible control to hold on to my money, not let me move my flight, not give me a refund. Even so, they canceled the flight. Marriott got in touch with me, telling me that the hotel that I was staying at was still open, but because I lived in the UK, they assumed that I couldn't travel, and even so, it was a booking that wasn't refundable. they asked me if I wanted a refund, and the refund was delivered 2 days after that. Now, two very similar situations financially, two very different ways of reacting and interacting with a customer. And if you look at, and I put here two versions of a purpose statement, at Marriott saying to be the world's favorite travel company, and British Airways saying to fly to serve. Now, if you say to fly to serve, and you're not flying and you are not serving, I think you can say you're probably not living up to your purpose. So the quality of, as David said, a good purpose becomes very apparent in a crisis like this. Now, I'm going to say, I'm not here to beat companies up. It's not easy to make the right decisions under these circumstances. And as a fellow CEO, I know how difficult these decisions are. But there's definitely one thing that we are learning is that customers will not forgive companies very quickly after this crisis if they made the wrong move. So it's very important that you think about the moves you make here. And a total opposite to this, and I highly recommend you watch this. It's available pretty much on any channel. And this is Arne Sorensen, the Marriott CEO. And very early in the crisis, he made this address to his own employees, but also to anyone else that was either a Marriott customer or any other stakeholder. And he was talking from the heart about how this crisis was impacting Marriott. And he was being very transparent, and he was being very clear that this was a bigger impact in a couple of weeks than the financial crisis in 2008 had had on the organization. But he also said he related a personal struggle that he had gone through it, which he had just been treated for cancer. And you can see he's bold on this video, which a lot of people did not know. And the emotion that he showed during this was certainly one of those exceptional speeches in leadership that will bring your staff along, and it will bring your customers along. And I certainly know who I'm choosing for my next trips when I'm going on a holiday. But also there's other examples in the hospitality area, and we're using these just simply because the businesses have been hit so hard. Rosewood, one of our clients, their purpose is around relationship hospitality, which is a philosophy and an approach on how they want to interact with their guests. And that provided guidance for them in a number of ways of how they can deal with the crisis. Most of their properties are closed, as you'd expect. But what they've done is they're using their kitchens, for example, to create meals for NHS staff. They have created a fund called Raise, which basically allows employees to pay a certain amount of their salary into this fund, and the family that owns the hotel group is matching that fund out of their personal wealth, and this goes to members of the Rosewood family, as they call them, who are in great need during this crisis. And this is just some of the examples from that Rosewood has done. Here's another example that I thought I'll share with you. For those of you who have been to London, you might have dined at the Delaunay, which is actually an Austrian restaurant. I had my wedding reception there. This is a very successful hospitality group. They have a number of restaurants. They are always full. It's very hard to get bookings. They have, of course, been very hard hit, as all of them are closed. Now, what Jeremy King, the owner, is pointing out here in this video, again, I would recommend you watch it if you find it online, is that 60% of the salaries of people come from the service that is collected when people pay their bills. And what they've been doing in the last 2 months is basically propping up the furlough scheme with the group's money to get people to that salary. But by now, they're basically at a financial situation they can no longer do this. So they came up with an initiative to raise, let's say, vouchers that you can buy and use at any time in the next however many years. And 50% of the money raised will go straight to the staff at the restaurants. Here's an example that is from Virgin, and I'm not beating up on my airlines. It's obviously they are having a particular hard time. You can't see this here, but Virgin has also decided, like British Airways, that they will no longer fly from Gatwick Airport, and which obviously is quite devastating for the airport. They chose this communication that they send to all their loyalty card members. And what they're saying in that is a very non-transparent way of saying, we're keeping slots in Gatwick for the foreseeable future, but we're moving all leisure flights to Heathrow. It's not clear what they mean by it. The press was very brutal about the fact what they're doing is moving all flights and not telling people that that is what's actually happening. So you must be transparent and you must say things the way they are. There are, of course, airlines that have done it better, Scandinavian Airlines. If you look at the purpose, we make life easier by making time matter to travelers, employees, and the planet. Again, in difficult times, what they have done, their staff is obviously trained in first aid, and they have retrained them to support the system on helping coronavirus patients. And I think Michael already hinted at this, but I wanted to give you a quick snapshot of the supermarkets here in the UK. The sales in March alone grew by 20%. Now that is the equivalent of the biggest Christmas they've ever had, just to give you an idea. And here is how those supermarket brands have fared in the eyes of customers, as in the reaction to or how they dealt with the coronavirus crisis. And you can see that pretty much all of them have done a really good job. Tesco and Sainsbury's leading the pack, but everyone's done well. You can see that Ocado is a bit behind now. Ocado, if you know them, is a home delivery version of a supermarket, and they had huge problems of logistical problems of dealing with the amount of requests they got. Otherwise, you can see everyone dealt very well with this. And the reason really was, and I'm giving you a number of examples here, but very quickly became clear that the vulnerable didn't have access. When the vulnerable arrived at supermarkets, there was nothing on the shelf. So they, for example, Sainsbury's started with letting them in earlier, before the rest of the organization, and created queuing systems that worked and kept the distance. Or, for example, with NHS staff, also gave them, NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, also gave them access earlier to be able to get their grocery supplies for the families. In the banking area, it was great to see that David was involved with Lloyd's purpose, and it was very clear that Lloyd's it really stands out in having done a very good job in making the loans accessible to customers quicker than some of the other banks. They've really lived up to the fact that they are customer-focused bank. Starling Bank is a rising new niche player. What they have done is basically came up with the idea of creating a second card. So if you were vulnerable and you didn't want to go to a supermarket, you could order this second card loaded with money, and your neighbor could do your shopping for you and pay with this card. Very useful, and they communicated heavily around this. So with pretty much everything I'm telling you here is the communication always followed an action, which is a key in a crisis. And you can see some of the social media coverage that happened from that. And I'm going to use a bit more, let's say, examples, and Michael used one of them already, where they weren't quite as good in the reaction to the crisis. Boots, of course, the biggest pharmacy beauty retailer here in the UK, it is one of the most trusted brands in the market. It is, of course, an essential retailer, but they really didn't treat their staff very well. They didn't give them the protective masks that they were asking for. They kept they started reopening the beauty departments of the stores rather just at the pharmacy part. And really the trust scores in Boots have gone down because of that. Starbucks, again, Starbucks was very late in closing its stores. They tried desperately to keep them open. When you have a purpose like saying to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time, and what you do is unsafe practices that put people at risk, you can see that the purpose and the actions are really not working together as strongly as they should. And then Sports Direct probably, and Michael showed this, the worst of them all really, by desperately trying to suggest that they were an essential retailer, which no one agreed with, and therefore want to keep their stores open. Absolutely did not think about protecting their staff, and were very clear that what was most important to them was profit and nothing else. And what happens here, and this shall be a warning for everyone. It is very hard in a situation that we find ourselves in to make great strides forward in a positive reputation. And you can see here, if you look at Tesco and Sainsbury's, that have done really very well in customer perception as handling the crisis, you could see that their reputation scores have improved, but you could say marginally by 7 or 9%. Now, when you get it wrong and look at the scores of Sports Direct and Virgin Atlantic in this case, the drop in reputation, and Sports Direct has since dropped further, is huge. So it's very hard to win in this situation, but it is very easy to lose, and you're going to lose big. And so I want to leave you with 4 thoughts here. You will have figured out that the right strategy is the absolute rock that will guide you through these times. And if you haven't got it, it's time to think about it and get it clear. It doesn't matter what you communicate, is my second point. The actions speak much louder than words, and then follow up with the words. This might be a unique opportunity for us all to get much closer to our audiences, because they have got a little bit more time to listen to us and share their experiences with us, and we get to know them better, which hopefully, and I'm building on David's thoughts here, will give you an opportunity to evolve to a better business overall, and more in line with a sustainable future. And I'm going to hand over to Michael after this quote that we thought was a good summary of the current time. And I think it's a rephrasing of Winston Churchill's phrase, but you should never let a serious crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to do things you thought you could never do before. Thank you.
Thank you, Manfred. It's not Michael. Michael needs to get punished for getting a dog. I need to introduce to this audience Hugo, a small poodle who probably has gnawed through the router cable at Michael's home, because we have a horrible internet connection there. And we seem to also have a horrible connection with David, whom we will try to bring back at the end of this webinar. There's a couple of ideas and thoughts that we haven't discussed, that we haven't heard from him about. But overall, I think that was quite an impressive array of ideas of things to do, of things not to do, of messages. But all these things need a platform to be played out on. And in order to talk about that, as a great example, we found Thomann Geis-Winkler, a fellow Austrian who lives and works in Munich. He is an enterprise account executive. So I have to read that from a paper because I was not supposed to introduce you. I'm very happy that I have a chance to do that. He works in talent acquisition and employer branding. And Thoman is gonna talk a little bit about, examples on how to do it, how to get these messages across to your clients, to your customers, to the people that will determine your future. Thoman, they're all yours.
Thanks a lot for this nice introduction. So, as mentioned, basically an Austrian living abroad in Munich. So happy to speak in English to you, but if you mind later on, I do have a decent Styrian accent too. So I'm more than happy to support you in German language as well. So what we've seen so far is the do's and don'ts in communications. And what I'm gonna bring to you in the next 10 minutes are a few examples on how is it possible to bring this brand strategy, these stories, the good ones hopefully, onto LinkedIn, and to give an insight why it matters at the end. So if we start by taking a look on LinkedIn itself, then the question of the why, so why should I care about LinkedIn, what's in it for me, is twofold. So first thing is it's simply the numbers, it's the members. As you can see in this chart here, it's quite global. So you have the audience abroad as in Austria as well. But the second thing that makes it much more of interest from a business perspective is what are people doing when they are online on LinkedIn? So what's their purpose? So why do you, for example, go on LinkedIn? What do you do there? And we ask exactly this question. So what do you want to see? What do you as a LinkedIn member expect on LinkedIn to happen? And the questions were designed to compare it to Twitter and Facebook. So a lot of numbers, but if you read beneath the charts, there's one word occurring all the time. It's professional. So what people expect on LinkedIn to happen is professional content. It's to connect with professionals, find professional news, get news from companies. So that's not that surprising, but it's the main differentiator if you think about, against other platforms. So if you do think, should we do it Facebook or LinkedIn? So the overall statement here is the mindset people bring along when going to a platform on LinkedIn is business. So people want to hear from your organizations, from the markets they're in, the topics they care about, and they are heavily interested because it's time they are investing. It's not time spent because you're bored on the train and you just watch some videos on Facebook. It's really an investment because it's your job. So that's why you should overall care if you think about using LinkedIn. It's a business channel. So as social media overall grows, LinkedIn is experiencing massive growth regarding how much time is spent on the platform, what is viewed, how many impressions, meaning interactions, are happening. But more interesting than that is that it really dramatically changed in the last weeks or so what people are consuming. So it's not just Corona crisis, it's a longer term trend that people are consuming more and more content, and it's not just the jobs. So people are spending time on LinkedIn to get information, to find insights into industries, to learn more about companies, trends, research, whatever they're into. So it beats the jobs, which is the most commonly known. LinkedIn is there for. So yeah, well, you can go online. The opposite is true. It's like 15 times the amount people are doing. It's not jobs, it's content of diverse character. So how does the Corona crisis now affect what people do on LinkedIn? This is quite tremendous. If you compare like the three main areas on the chart, what you can see in January and February, the top trended hashtags people are navigating for, looking for, following, were business topics. As we might say, well, that makes sense on LinkedIn. It's marketing, leadership, it's business. So when you think about a business topic, what should people care about? It's business. No surprise at all. What happened in March? You see a massive drop there and a complete change. The top two trending hashtags has been coronavirus and COVID. So even being a business platform, the interest of people, of our LinkedIn members, shifted completely. So if people do care about what's happening with Corona crisis, the implicit message in there is they care about how your company is reacting on it. How do you behave? And we've seen a lot of examples before. So how are they behaving? Does it stick to the brand, to the vision, to the purpose? So there's a massive demand for those information. And so I brought for you some Austrian examples, what went quite decently. So if we think about this fundamental crisis, there's one question, and it's like, how did your company behave during those times? So it's not something really new. Corporate social responsibility has been there before, but the interest in it, the active search for it, is way more bigger than now. So I brought you 3 examples. One is Wolford, a famously known company in Vorarlberg for textiles and clothing. They completely changed into producing masks. And they took the opportunity to show that. So the Austrian Ministry of Economy, Ms. Schramberg, she posted a lot of it, how great Austrian companies are doing by doing this excellent job in producing masks desperately needed on the market. The university, they provided mental health care and how to cope with stress. Austrian Airlines, down on earth explicitly, I mean, no flights at all. What they focused on was the good stories, how they helped the Austrians by bringing in masks. So you see, the demand is high. If you're on there, focus on the stories people want to hear about. So one is the responsibility part. Another thing is solidarity. So it's basically the same question with slightly different context. It's not maybe what you do in a very big perspective for overall society. It's the tiny parts you do. I found a very nice example yesterday when I prepared navigating through LinkedIn and searching for good Austrian examples was Linsinger. And what they did is they created a book where children can draw on, because being aware of all the people in home office having kids. So I myself have a 2-year-old. It's really stressful having the kids and the job and all that. So it was a nice little post showing that we care, we understood it's stressful. We did something for our employees and for everybody to use. Wien Energy, this story went crazy internationally as well. They really locked down 53 people, so not their decision. So they were volunteers to secure Vienna's electric supply. So and the story was like, it was a lot of hearts, a lot of good emotions. So it really was well done for the brand, because it was a solidarity act for them. Flughafen Wien, essentially same story as Austrian Airlines, bringing in stuff desperately needed in the market. So thank you. It's really simple, but honestly, it's not happening that much. So if you have this story about how much you care about your employees, how they are the backbone of your company, that's why you are successful. It's so easy to post it online and to show it to everybody that you are grateful for your employees. Just brought a few examples there from different sectors. I found the opposite on LinkedIn, where when you go to a company page today, the last thing you see is some Christmas story. So it's very stale, and you don't find anything about the current situation, which brings not the best impression to yourself. So a quick thank you is a very easy way to be relevant and nice in this situation. The culture. So when we talk about purpose, when we talk about brand, who brings it to life? So how does a brand come to life? So how can you get it somewhere, get in touch with it? It's people. It's always people. It's your own employees. So by bringing them in front of your brand, by showing real people, real stories of people, it makes you, it's way more easier to get an impression of how you are, who you are, how do you work in these very critical times. So quite nice examples there. One from top level of CEO ÖBB, who really posted how proud he is about his Austrian universe of employees and how great they were doing, making sure everything is still functioning in this world. Sonnentor, a low Austrian company, very well known for Austrians for its tea. It was just a minor post showing people in the home office, in their setting, enjoying a cup of tea, showing that they really care about their people. It's a tiny message for the whole culture, but it helps. So it's not, you can't bring your brand by doing this one post which serves for all of it. It's by being transparent and by being visible to what you do, that you care, and so on. So by doing that, you get those impressions, and yeah, it helps for your brand. Last example here, Sealmaker from Burgenland, saying encourage their people to stay home, stay safe, wish them all the best, thank them for, and society as well. Just nice stories. What we completely lost the last, I would say, years, is the difference between people and brand. So you can communicate via the brand, and the brand is essential, but it's always people who really care about people. So if someone tells you a story about how great it is to work for this company, you will believe it. If someone shares a situation having with this brand, you will believe it, most likely. If it's just a statement, a bold statement like branding, marketing, it's a brand, you might believe it or not. So if you put your people in front, it's not like the brand shows the story, it's the people, it's your employees showing how great it is, or how they were well treated, whatever the story is, it will bring life to your story and it will be believable. So I've seen it from a person I know. I tend to react on it. It brings that what you want to happen, believability or just realness, if you want to say it like that. Last statement from my side. Being aware of Corona and that it's important to be up to date with what you're doing and bring this topic in your overall storytelling. Don't forget content. We're still, I would say, open for business. Our companies still are there in their industry, working for whatever they've done for the last years. So don't forget to share content which is relevant to your industry. And as a personal story at the end, please don't forget to stay fun. So I don't have to explain for any Austrians who Manna Schnitten are. I'm a huge fan of them, and they're online on LinkedIn. And there was this quite funny video of Josef Hader where he talked about this story that something is wrong because they fit so perfectly into the packaging, and they shared it. And so my personal LinkedIn story from the last days was I commented on it, and I received back a like from Josef Manna. So I even loved them more than before, which is almost not possible. So just, you don't have to be super serious all the time. It does not be the stiff industry research all the time. It should be a mixture of all those topics we've seen before, content, and please stay fun, because we're all humans, and brands who are, likable will do better. Thank you a lot.
Thomas, thank you very much. I mean, it is a challenge for every moderator to talk with somebody whose name is Thoman. It took me a while to get that into my head. Thank you. A great array of, of I think very, very easy to use, immediately to use advice that I'm sure everybody out there is grateful for. Coming back to the theory, kind of, closing the bracket on where we opened it. David, I hope your connection is better now. We lost you when you were talking about when Michael asked you, so is this great moment of purpose, is that gonna last, or is it a luxury? Will interest wane when the situation will change? Maybe you can kind of, in a nutshell, tell us what you said about that, because I think we're not sure how many people heard you. And then I have a couple of questions that in the meantime also already came from the audience.
Christian, thank you very much, and I hope this is a bit better this time. No poodle eating through my cable either as an excuse. Now, I haven't met Thomas or Manfred before this particular webinar, but I think there is a remarkable consistency of messaging between us, because we all talked about the importance of having a purpose, not just as a statement which you then file away and never look at again, but as a living, breathing document which is inspiring and authentic and is practical. It's the basis for the actions that you take. I think we all emphasize the importance of transparency and radical transparency going forward, even more than historically. And the crucial link back to culture, the way we do things around here, which really is reinforcing the key messages and the key vision of the way that a business wants to behave day in, day out to its employees, its customers, and so on. And the examples from both Manfred and Thoman, I thought, were incredibly reinforcing of those points.
David, there was a question remaining about, when you talk about purpose, does purpose transcend production, marketing, HR? Does it go further? Is it just, is it just at the very top, or somewhere else to be found in the corporation?
No, we're talking about the purpose of the entire business. And so it has to be translated into the way that you market, into the way that you manage and support and nurture and develop your people. It has to be the way in which you approach health and safety. And I think what this crisis, this top trending hashtag on LinkedIn now of COVID-19 or coronavirus is telling us is just how important it is that businesses are coherent and consistent. And there's no point in having some brilliant marketing folk if the experience then of the customer when it comes to the actual operation of the business and so on is a way away from those wonderful marketing slogans. So the purpose has to be absolutely the unifying idea about why is this business here? What is it in business to achieve?
They're, coming from a country where, the backbone is small and medium-sized enterprises. The question, of course, arises: does this play out the same for everybody? Is it the same for small companies as for big companies, or can the underdog this time, steal the bone, or will Goliath crush David, as we know it from past experience?
So I've spent most of my career working with small businesses. I was involved for many years, for instance, in helping the British government to reorganize and improve help here in the UK for small firms, particularly those with the aspiration and ability to grow. I've worked quite a lot with the European Union on how do these ideas about business taking responsibility for its social and environmental and economic impacts translate for small firms and medium-sized firms. I think in many respects, all of this is much easier for an owner-manager, for a family-owned business, particularly a multi-generation family-owned business, because they've got the heritage that they can draw upon, they've got all of the history, and crucially, they are much closer to all of their employees, they're much closer to their customers, to their suppliers, to the communities from which they draw their license to operate. So I think these points about purpose and having a strong, ethical, sustainable culture and so on are even more relevant for smaller businesses and probably easier to do, paradoxically.
Well, David, maybe coming to an end, any practical advice, if there would be 1, 2, or 3 questions that companies would need to ask themselves now, what would they be?
So I was very struck the other day by a wonderful quotation from one of the top professors in the London Business School, Gary Hamel. And he said that in a small crisis, power and decision-making goes to the center. But in a big crisis like the one we're living through, it has to go to the periphery. In other words, you can't wait for head office to make decisions. You as the frontline doctor or nurse in that intensive care unit or what have to be making the decisions in the here and now. And I very much hope that just as Twitter has said to its employees, if you want to stay working from home forever, you can do so because we trust you. I very much hope that organizations will think really creatively about how has the forced innovation that we've gone through in the last few weeks taught us that there are better ways of doing things, which in particular will encourage our employees to be more entrepreneurial, to be more initiative taking, to come up with innovations, and to help to push them through our organizations faster. So if I had one piece of advice, it would be about how do we really capture and keep on using the creativity and the insights and the commitment of our frontline employees to become faster, more agile at responding to what is only going to be an even faster changing future marketplace.
Very well, David. Thank you so much. I think a great thought at the very end. I think we all agree that the building back better is the right thing to do. And we hope that in the course of this conversation with David Grace and Manfred Abraham and Thomas Geiswinkler, we came closer to defining what better actually really means. I hope that is definitely true for me. I hope it was true for you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all three of you for your participation, to share your expertise, your wisdom, your time with us. It's the most precious gift that people can give to each other in good times and in bad times. And I do hope that we will meet and see each other again under different, very changed and much better circumstances. Thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay on for a moment. Again, as I in my introduction, I briefly mentioned already, on the 26th of May, there is a webinar, Innovation in der Krise, neue Ideen für schwere Zeiten. As I said before in German, it's about design thinking, about a kind of conceptual approach, a new thinking model. The Imperial College is is the academic lead worldwide in this design thinking approach, and we have found with our presenter probably the sharp end of this spear, of this academic spear in this field to share with you. On the 3rd of June, we're going to talk about immersive technologies, about how immersive technologies and their adoption will not only be propelled by the crisis, but also most probably change the way we will deal with it, and hopefully we'll get out of it. This is going to be followed by 2 seminars offered by our colleagues in New York and in Munich. As I said, digitalization of the supply chain and additive manufacturing will be the topics there. With that, I do apologize again for the technical difficulties that we encountered. I hope you still got a good idea on where to look at and where to eventually go to with your brand, with your strategic perspectives for a pretty uncertain future. Thank you again for visiting, and hoping that to see you again soon.